Previously in Virtual Jane Con.
Now, at the same time as the agricultural fields of an estate underwent huge changes, so did the park around the house, with the development of English gardens, also called landscape gardens, as opposed to the French or geometric garden, think Versailles. Landscape gardens were as artificial as geometric gardens, but they were supposed to look beautifully natural.
Good day to you fellow virtual Janeites and other online passers-by, and welcome to this video premiering on the 13th of July 2024 for Virtual JaneCon. My name is Marie and I go by LinguiPixie on social media. In last year's video, link in the description box below, I talked about the relationships between land management and moral characterizations in Pride and Prejudice, thereby explaining why it was through perusing at Darcy's magnificent grounds at Pemberley that Lizzie claims she started to fall in love with him. In this video, I propose to continue the exploration of that theme, that is, the relations between estate improvement and moral characterization in Jane Austen's works, by looking at another one of her main novels, namely Mansfield Park. Now, before diving into this, I need to preface it with 4 elements. 1. I've only read Mansfield Park once and didn't enjoy it much. Actually, I didn't quite understand Jane Austen's intentions in it, which is actually one of the reasons why I find it so interesting to try and understand it better with this video. 2. The main source for this video is a book called The Improvement of the Estate, a study of Jane Austen's novels by Iain B. Duckworth. 3. I made this video so that it should be understandable on its own, but just know that it is also designed as a complement to last year's video, in which you'll find more extensive context about the big changes in land management in Jane Austen's England and their effects on society. And 4. In this video, I will only talk about the estates located in England and how they can be seen as mini-societies mirroring society and how it should work as a whole. I will not, however, talk about estate management outside of England, which in the case of Mansfield Park means that I won't be touching on the sensitive topic of slavery in Antigua. It is documented that Jane Austen's family had ties with plantations in Antigua, but also that Jane and her siblings were rather in favour of abolition. 2 interesting facts about Mansfield Park, though. The novel was most likely named in reference to Lord Mansfield, a judge mostly famous for his judgment in Somerset's case in 1772, in which he determined that slavery had no basis in common law. Another name in the book seems to be a direct reference to the topic of slavery. Mrs. Norris, Fanny's horrible aunt on a perpetual power trip, who has the same name as Robert Norris, an infamous slave trafficker. Well, with no further ado and after a long prefacing intro, let's dive into the video itself. To begin with, I haven't counted them, but I think it is quite safe to assume that Mansfield Park is the novel in which the most numerous country estates are mentioned, and at length. Just look at this little family tree / map of the county. Now, in the 18th century, it was very fashionable in England to remodel, or as they called it back then, improve one's country estate, with 2 very famous landscape improvers, Capability Brown and his disciple Humphrey Repton, whose work was the subject of many a controversy in what was referred to as the Paper War, opposing Repton to Sir Uvedale Price and Richard Payne Knight. We'll read a couple of excerpts later. In Mansfield Park, talk of improvement starts as Mr. Rushworth mentions a visit at Smith's estate, Compton, which was just remodeled by Repton himself. "I never saw a place so altered in my life," he says. "I told Smith I did not know where I was." This leads Rushworth to want to improve his own estate, Sotherton Court, which scheme Maria and Mrs. Norris are quick to approve, the latter mentioning that she is quite the improver herself as she remodeled the parsonage at Mansfield. Mr. Crawford, having improved his estate of Everingham, is the designated expert in the whole affair. But Crawford has other plans too. He wants to improve Thornton Lacey, Edmund's parsonage to be. The farmyard must be cleared away entirely and planted up to shut out the blacksmith's shop. The house must be turned to front the east instead of the north. The entrance and principal rooms, must be on that side, where the view is really very pretty. I am sure it may be done. And there must be your approach, through what is at present the garden. You must make a new garden at what is now the back of the house. Just look at how similar his plan is to one Repton once wrote. The house was formerly approached and entered in the south front, which was encumbered by stables and farmyards. The road came through the village, and there was a large pool in the front. This pool has been changed to an apparent river, and the stables have been removed. An ample garden has been placed behind the house. The entrance is changed from south to the north side. Duckworth comments, given Jane Austen's symbolic mode, Crawford's suggestions are insidious enough. His plans to clear away, plant up and shut out features of the landscape are to be read as a rejection of a traditional shape of reality, while his wish to reorient the front of the house suggests a desire for complete cultural reorientation. Indeed, according to him, what makes estate improvement such a crucial theme in Mansfield Park is that throughout Jane Austen's fiction, estates function not only as the settings of action but as indexes to the character and social responsibility of the owners. In other words, good improvers and good estate managers prove to be good characters, and bad improvers and bad estate managers prove to be morally flawed characters. Now, Jane Austen was not against improvement, as estates need to evolve alongside society. As society changes, so must the country estates that are at the centre of the social order of the English countryside, both in order to stay in touch with society and to reflect and represent those changes in the organisation of life on the territory. One should therefore not change everything at once, as this is not desirable in society either. On the contrary, one should respect what already exists, the history of the place, and aim to improve it, not alter it on a whim or to satisfy one's vanity. A compelling example is that of trees, which are a clear enough metaphor of the whole process. They take time to grow and become an inherent part of the landscape. They structure the view and the division between functional spaces. Cutting down trees is therefore a huge change, as it alters both the aesthetics and functions of the environment, but it also literally uproots crucial elements that have slowly evolved and therefore improved over many decades or centuries in and with this environment. Jane's ideas about country estates representing society on a smaller scale did not come out of nothing. They are indeed very similar to Edmund Burke's, a famous Anglo-Irish statesman and philosopher who used the imagery of excessive estate improvements to improve the horrors of the French Revolution. Duckworth concludes that in Burke's wake, we need not be surprised that Jane Austen should suggest in the adoption of Reptonian methods dangerous consequences for the continuity of a culture. One of Jane Austen's ideals in terms of estate improvement that is discussed in the novel is that improvement should not focus solely on aesthetics but also on function. For instance, the function of the estate and the main family within their environment is to be leaders of the community. The estate should therefore reflect that, particularly in the position and accessibility of the house. Shutting out or screening off the house, as Crawford and Repton described earlier, may improve the owner's view, but it clearly sends the wrong message, as it isolates the leader from the community and thereby shows his disinterest in the role. Now, listen to Maria describing Sotherton. Here begins the village. Those cottages are really a disgrace. The church spire is reckoned remarkably handsome. I am glad the church is not so close to the great house, as often happens in all places. The annoyance of the bells must be terrible. Of course, Maria doesn't like the ungraceful cottages that spoil the view, but she also wants to cut off the church from the main house's daily concerns. She doesn't want to hear the church bells that are annoying, and therefore doesn't feel like it's her duty to attend service as a future community leader. And the only redeeming quality of the building is not even that it is beautiful, but that it is said to be so. Vanity and absence of social leadership at its finest. Which leads us to highly doubt Mrs. Grant's suggestion that Rushworth's marriage with Maria will be a form of improvement for the estate.
The place that might be improved through marriage, though, is Thornton Lacey parsonage, once Edmund marries Fanny.
Now, Edmund is already one of the few good guys in Mansfield Park, which is reflected in his views on estate improvement. When Sotherton's improvement is being discussed, he indeed goes, "Had I a place to new fashion, I should not put myself into the hands of an improver. I would rather have an inferior degree of beauty of my own choice and acquired progressively," meaning he does not want to operate massive changes and values the history of a place. However, he is not without fault and almost falls for the temptress Mary Crawley, who, just like Maria Bertram, wants to keep the church out of sight as often as possible. Fanny, on the other hand, is the only character whose moral compass points north all along, which is reflected in her conservative and respectful attitude towards her surroundings. For instance, she doesn't want the trees to be cut and has not disrupted the environment that was more or less given to her upon entering Mansfield Park. Duckworth comments, "In contrast to all the movement of furniture that is taking place elsewhere, Fanny preserves the East Room as it always was. She would not have changed its furniture for the handsomest in the house. Her room becomes the still point in a moving house, a sanctuary of consolation but also of responsibility." Unlike Tom, who already behaves as the master of the house in his father's absence, maybe Fanny understands the importance of upholding the rules that make society society, because she wasn't born and educated as the natural future mistress of the place or of another, like Maria and Julia. On the contrary, she has had to find her place in the house once she was brought to it by Sir Thomas, and has come to instinctively understand what the symbolic pillars of this micro-society are. Incidentally, Sir Thomas begins to find Fanny quite improved after his return from Antigua. Despite the moral decay of most of her surroundings, it's on the contact with the ancient pillars of the micro-society of a country estate that fostered such an improvement in a child with such a lowly background. All the movement of furniture mentioned above is a reference to the theatricals, which importance, according to Duckworth, can be understood in the light of what he has already explained about bringing too many changes to society at once. Indeed, only Fanny understands that the theatricals operate the same kind of drastic changes as a Brownian or Reptonian improvement on the micro-society that Mansfield Park is, or, as Duckworth describes it, beginning modestly, a few yards of green baize for a curtain, and perhaps that may be enough, the enterprise soon gathers momentum, invading more and more of the house's space and altering the disposition of its furniture. To conclude, in Mansfield Park, Jane Austen uses her usual didactic method to discuss society. Characters with good morals indicate which view of estate management and improvement she favors, while her characters' views on estate management and improvement can also be used as a tool in the service of their moral characterization, especially in the light of the paper war, which her original readers definitely knew about. Good improvers and good estate managers prove to be good characters, and bad improvers and bad estate managers prove to be morally flawed characters.
Father, you've not told us the outcome of your stay in Antigua.
I'm happy to say our affairs in Antigua do now prosper.
I hope you won't mind my asking, sir, but now that you have lived amongst it, do you believe slavery can continue in the same way?
Our little cousin is a friend to abolition.
I think, my dear, we may very well do without slavery. But without order, we are lost.
Let me know in the comment section if you'd like me to continue exploring this theme next year. I haven't read all of Duckworth's book yet, but I am looking forward to it, and I think I'll probably go with Emma or Northanger Abbey, two novels I did thoroughly enjoy this time. Of course, don't hesitate to check out my 2 previous virtual JaneCon videos on my channel and to explore this year's program as well. You can also find me on Instagram, look for LinguiPixie. Bye!